welcome. I'm Steve Jorson from Northeast Metro Climate Action. We are a volunteer-run community organization with members in White Bear Lake, North Oaks, North St. Paul, Vadnais Heights, and Shoreview. Our mission is to raise awareness of the climate crisis in our communities through outreach events like this, as well as being active in our community and working directly with our elected leaders, both state and local. Tonight's event actually, it was last night. I forgot to hit the record button at the beginning, so I'm recording this the day after. The event is electronics recycling with Maria Jensen from Recycling Electronics in America. I only missed a couple of minutes from her from the beginning, and we'll hook into that in just a second. Northeast Metro Climate Action acknowledges that we are located on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary land of the indigenous people. And I also would like to thank our co-sponsors, Resilient Roseville, St. Croix Valley, Indivisible, and Vote Climate. With that, we'll start into the video live from White Bear Lake Library from last night.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm curious, who has a drawer of shame at home? Yeah. What's in your drawer of shame?
Cables and things that I never.
Every cord that you've kept since 1983. All right. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, the cords, batteries.
Okay. Yeah. Cords, cell phones, batteries.
Question about VHS tapes and CD discs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are those electronic waste too?
They're considered media, so they don't have, one definition that we use is anything with a battery, a cord, or a circuit board. So if it doesn't have a battery, a cord, or a circuit board, it's not technically e-waste. And it's also not going to have precious metals or toxic metals in it. It might have other toxins in it from the plastic, other things certainly, but it's not technically electronic waste.
But then like children's toys that
Absolutely.
make sound and have visuals.
Yep, anything that makes sound or has visuals is going to be e-waste. Yep, it has a battery in it. More increasingly, they have lithium-ion batteries in them, right? That have lots of cobalt and lithium in them. Yeah. So what else? Who else has a drawer of shame? I saw other people raise their hand. Anybody? Did you say somebody over here had one? What's in your same as it? Yeah.
Are you talking to, okay, old holiday
Right,
lights
yeah.
that are incandescent and not LED.
And so for folks who have a drawer of old electronics or a basement of old electronics, why haven't you recycled it yet? You might need it. Yep, sure. Why would you say you haven't taken it to the recycling center yet?
Well, one of the reasons I have is that it's not easy to do.
Yeah, for
Recycle,
sure.
replace
Yeah.
is actually way across town.
Exactly. Yep.
Size covers and
Right.
and over metals and for fibers and for this and that.
Right. Yep. And you really, you might be right. Each collection site in every city and every county takes different things. Some charge for things. For example, some places you go, they want you to pay $30 for a microwave, right? And other places they'll just turn some stuff away, right? Especially big items or hard to recycle items. They'll just take your computers and your phones and your cords and tell you to take the rest somewhere else. And you might not know where that is, right? So we'll get to that later about some of those barriers for recycling, but let's see. Doesn't want to advance my slides. Oh, okay.
And there was a question on the chat. Are all these ending up in landfills right now, or?
Yeah, we'll get to that for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, but short answer is we're recycling about 24% of our electronic waste, which is not a lot. And e-waste is toxic. So that kind of alphabet soup there at the bottom are some of the many toxins that are present in our e-waste. And those are the things that are going to be leaching into our air, water, and soil if they're ending up in incinerators, for example, like the RECA, or in our landfills, right? In fact, though e-waste only makes up 1.5% of what's in our landfills today, it represents 70% of the toxic metals that are polluting our landfills. So it's really disproportionately adding toxins to our waste when we don't recycle it. Are you handling people coming into the,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I wasn't sure if I should do that. Okay,
I'm not as quick as I should be, but.
Okay.
we're getting
good. I won't worry about it then. But, and when we're exposed to these toxins, either through water, our drinking water or air, right? Like if there's a landfill fire, if you live next to an incinerator and you're exposed, these are some of the health effects that can happen, right? Especially things like spontaneous abortions, stillbirth, premature births, and lower learning outcomes for children that are exposed. This is the HERC incinerator, and I won't go into it too much today, but basically trash that's going into the HERC incinerator is not sorted, and electronic waste is ending up being burned in downtown Minneapolis. Electronic waste contains batteries, and as I mentioned before, more and more of those batteries are lithium-ion batteries. And so these are the type of batteries that if they get punctured or bent, they can have thermal runoff or just basically get really, really hot or explode, and they will start the surrounding waste on fire. So if you Google like fire at landfill or fire at recycling facility, you'll get like I did in these two screenshots, you'll get dozens of results, and they're spanning like less than a week time. Around the US, they're just happening constantly. And if you open up a few of those, like just in the top few news stories, you'll hear that they cite that it was probably a lithium-ion battery. And at this point, it's not even, they don't even oftentimes do like a forensics on the smoldering remains. They just assume that it's a lithium-ion battery because that's just a safe assumption that the waste industry makes at this point because it's happening so much. I think I have another slide. Yeah. See, I've got the Zoom folks in the way here. Year over year, we're losing somewhere between 1% to 3% of all of our waste infrastructure. So that's things like hauling trucks, materials recovery centers, and transfer stations. 1% to 3% of them are burning down every single year. This was a facility in Blaine, Minnesota that burned down in 2019, and it was worth $20 million. And that was from a lithium-ion battery that someone had put in their recycling bin, right? So it ended up at their transfer station, and it had thermal runoff while everybody was off the clock, and the whole building burnt down. This was a truck from St. Louis County, Minnesota, so it was owned by the county, and they bought it a week before it started on fire from a battery. And the same facility had a fire in 2017 that cost them about $500,000. And so those are all tax dollars that are going to replace and repair those things. And this was the fire in Rice County, Minnesota. This happened May last year, and it was a lithium-ion battery that started a fire. Well, most folks were off the clock, and it burned 30 feet deep in the size of a football field. And it took over a week about a week for them to put it out. So in the meantime, it was polluting all the soil, the crops, and water and air for everybody around that area. This is a study from Poland that studied pollution from these fires that were started in landfills. And they said that from one large landfill fire, about 6.5 million people have measurably higher levels of PM10 exposure. And there were 79 fires that year in Poland. I'm using data from Poland because I don't have more local data, but of course the population density is different, but the idea here is that a lot of people are exposed when this happens and their health is going to be impacted. So if I can, I'm not sure if this video will work today. So I might just, yeah, I'll just send it to you. How about that? It shows how e-waste is recycled.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send that out to everybody. But here's the general idea. I had to move the Zoom picture again. No, that's okay. Oh, can I? If I can move my,
I have a quick question.
I think the cursor is like not responding on the laptop at this point, which is making it kind of tricky. There we go. Okay. All right.
Quick question.
So when you take your electronic waste to your county site or wherever it is that you go to recycle your electronic waste, it's collected and aggregated there, but then it's sent to a recycler. And what they do is they basically shred it, and they sort all the material into basically categories of what kind of metals are in there that can be extracted. And then they send that to a materials recovery facility that then extracts the metals, and then they sell it again to somebody who's going to refine them and use them in some manufacturing process. So e-waste is really about the metals. There's a lot of precious metals in there that are worth extracting.
Are the electronics that are brought here, are they shipped to other countries or is it mostly done here?
That's a tricky question, but if you're using a recycler that is certified, then they have the industry certification that ensures that they're not sending any of their e-waste out of the country, which is another kind of issue we're addressing in the bill that I'll get to. But it's very important to use a certified recycler. And so if you go to your county, you can ask them, are you using a certified recycler, which almost all the counties in Minnesota are. So that's good.
Question.
We have one very, very small one in Anoka. Yeah, but they're very, very small. Other than that, most of the e-waste is getting refined in other countries. So I know that sounded contradictory, but let me rewind a little bit. So after it's shredded and it gets turned into a commodity, that's when they're shipping it overseas. So at that point, it's something that's being purchased, and then they're taking the metals out and refining it. So e-waste as on its own, they're not allowed to export it to very many countries because of the Basel Convention. And that was to reduce or eliminate e-waste dumping in developing countries, because that was a big thing in the early 2000s.
There's a
Yeah.
note in the chat that if an audience member asks a question, if you could repeat it so that they can hear.
Yeah, I can do my best. Yeah. So we were talking about where does the e-waste go once it's collected. It gets shredded locally here in Minnesota usually, or in Wisconsin. And then they're making it into a commodity where the circuit boards are shredded and sorted, and then the smelters are purchasing those from the recyclers. That makes sense. So
Can I ask a quick
this was
question?
our attempt to estimate how much value there is in our e-waste here in Minnesota every year. And we found that there are 38 million pounds of valuable elements, things like palladium, gold, silver, copper, nickel, all the kind of main critical metals that you hear people talk about. And they're almost a $3 billion value. So it's every single year, that's what's generated from that 46 pounds per person in Minnesota. And so to kind of put that in perspective, that's enough silver for 440,000 solar panels and enough copper for 155,000 EVs. And these are some of the top metals by value that are found in our e-waste stream.
So is it still possible to ask a quick question? Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Where are those values coming from? So,
Yeah, they're coming from our study that we did.
okay, so that's in your study.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so that also translates to about almost 2,000 direct jobs and 3,000 total jobs if we were to collect all this material and process it to recycle the metals out. So just kind of switching gears to some of our legislative agenda this year. There are 25 states total that have e-waste collection legislation, and none of them collect over 24% of their electronic waste.
Okay, I'm getting out of here.
So we have a bill that was actually just filed today or sent to the revisor's office today. It's called the 100% electronic waste collection bill.
Scary.
Yeah, Athena Hollins in the state or in the House, and Rob Kupek in the Senate. So, yep. And so what this bill is going to do is it's really aiming at what we see as kind of the lowest hanging fruit to improve e-waste recycling here in Minnesota and to take advantage of all of those metals so that we don't have to mine them, right? And so, like I said, we're collecting 24% of our electronic waste today. And that is, we're operating under a program that was written in 2007. And that program is really focused on these 4 categories that are on the screen. So computers, DVD players, video cassette recorders, and video display devices, or TVs. So it really only covers part of the cost of collection for only those items. And so what we want to do is we want to cover the entire e-waste stream, which is somewhat tricky to do, because if you think about since 2007, how many things have come onto the market, right, that didn't exist in 2007. So one of the most important things that we want in this bill is that it's defined, or electronic waste is defined as anything powered by electricity, right? So that as the free market creates new items, they will automatically fall into this program and the collection will be funded, so that we don't end up where we were before, which is really subsidizing collection by charging residents at the door. And so with the 100% collection bill, we're not going to be charging anybody at the door. Anywhere that's a registered collection site, it will be able to offer free collection, and for anything with a battery or cord or circuit board. And it will be funded by both manufacturer responsibility. So if we go back to some of this definition, those items on the right, on the left there, are going to be funded by manufacturer responsibility, which means manufacturers are registering and covering the cost of the program. And the catch-all category of the rest of electronic devices is going to be funded at the retail level. So when a wholesaler sells something to a retailer, there'll be a fee there, and that's how it will be collected. And the main reason we're doing that is to be able to allow ourselves to have that loose definition of anything that's an electronic device. So that's why we have that catch-all category. So the 2007 bill started covering about 40 million pounds of collection in 2007, and has decreased steadily over time, and now it only funds about 20 million pounds. And it doesn't fully fund those 20 million pounds. It's also being subsidized by charging consumers. So that's a big reason why we're only at 24% collection. So with the 100% collection bill, we're going to be collecting enough funds to collect the full waste stream, which is 133 million pounds a year. And collectors will be incentivized to do this, and they'll be required to provide free collection for all Minnesota residents and businesses that have 10 employees or less, or fewer. Yeah.
Maybe you're gonna cover this, if so, just say.
Go for it.
Is there a discussion of using IRA, IIJA funds to supplement what we've already been doing? Is that
Yeah, so are we gonna use any IRA or BIL funds for collection, right? Yep. Or
Yeah.
to subsidize
help out
this?
with the
Yeah.
gaps?
Yeah, so there's definitely like conversations about what we could use that for, but for a program that's ongoing like this, this is going to be every year into the future. So we want to have a sustainable funding stream that won't go away. So, but definitely IRA money to like open up a facility to process, because once we start collecting 100% of our e-waste, we're going to need more processing capacity. And so there's definitely interest in some communities to open up a place to recycle the electronics and take advantage of the jobs. So that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I understand that the bill will enable the 100% collection. Does it also come to shredding and commoditization side of the equation? What happens there? I mean, are we still going to sell that commodity shred to foreign countries to process, or is the intent to bring that onshore, in Minnesota particularly?
Yeah, so are there plans to kind of close the loop here locally and keep those metals within the local economy? Yeah, so this bill is only about collection. So it's saying, let's solve this kind of lowest hanging fruit, get this stuff out of the landfills and the trash incinerators, and get them recycled, right? Because it's kind of the chicken and the egg. Yeah, so it'll get collected and it'll be sent to registered recyclers that have to be under this bill. They have to be certified. So that's I was kind of alluding to that before, but they have to be certified. So they have to process the material and turn it into a purchasable commodity before they send it across any borders, right? So,
So there is a piece.
yes, at least that requirement. But what will happen to the shredded material for now, until we do close the loop, is the metals that we really want are still going to be going overseas, and we still have to buy those off the international market. So that's another step of what we need to do to close the loop. Right, yep, yeah, so if we can open facilities, which there are facilities actually calling Deed right now and talking to them about opening up in Minnesota because they've heard about this work. So the community has definitely been talking about that. What can we do? You know, how can we take advantage of this? What's the next step, you know? There's a lot of interest in the Iron Range to open up a facility that can extract the metals here locally and then keep those metals in the local economy. So hopefully that's step 2 after we stop throwing our electronics in the trash and redirect them to be recycled.
And
Yeah,
that was a big discussion when we passed the Clean Energy by 2040 bill. It was a big discussion of what are we gonna do with our waste staying clean, because once we do this, we have to make that commitment, right? So I love this low-hanging fruit idea, but just to appease minds, like that is an ongoing conversation as well.
yeah. A big debate during the 100% clean energy by 2040 bill was that what are we going to do with the waste? And we also have a bill about solar panels too, but also where are we going to get the critical metals? Because almost everywhere that's mining for things like cobalt and lithium, they're doing so with horrible labor practices, right? And oftentimes illegal practices. And so that's a very common anti-clean energy argument is, well, where are you going to get the critical metals? And so we see this as a very big part of the solution.
Well, I
So.
expect there to be a-
What?
They're hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, the risks for shredding and processing the e-waste, definitely, to the workers, absolutely.
The question
Yeah.
was risk to the workers' health, hazards for shredding, and that's, right?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, absolutely. We included money for air quality improvement grants for all the registered recyclers. So that when they shred the material, they can do so in like a vacuum sealed room, basically. And so that all that gets captured and there isn't exposure to workers. Absolutely. Yeah.
Is there a plan to make it easy for consumers to actually, take it to the recyclers?
Yeah, is there a plan to make it easier for the consumers to bring it to the recycler? Yeah, so what this bill is going to do is it's really going to make an economic incentive for opening more collection sites. And so we've talked to a lot of like all the stakeholders that are collecting electronics right now. And it's like, okay, if we can do this, what will that enable you to do? And how much do you need to be able to do to open more collection sites and really go out and get this from people, right? And so that's what we're enabling with this bill is more collection sites opening, and especially in more densely populated areas, there may be collectors that are going to go door to door and get this material too. But we at least want people not to have to drive more than 10 or 20 miles, especially out in rural areas. People are used to driving pretty far, but we don't want them to have to drive, clear across the county to drop off their e-waste. Yeah, and we don't want them to be charged once they get there. It's going to be free. Yeah.
Would this bill also include vape devices and e-cigarettes, since they're also being marketed as disposable lithium batteries?
Yeah, so the question was, will this bill also cover vape devices and other things with embedded batteries? It will. So a few will be collected, but those specifically vapes actually cannot be recycled because the lithium battery is encased with nicotine, and that dose of nicotine can be lethal. And so no recycler will take it because first of all, embedded lithium batteries are problematic anyways, because you have to get them out before you put the rest of the device into a shredder. Otherwise it will cause a fire at the shredder. Lithium batteries are processed underwater, actually. So they go to a completely different type of recycler, and that's how they're processed. So, but I will say there is talk of banning that type of design, the disposable design for e-waste. And we have language to do that. I'm not sure yet if it's going to be introduced this session, but that's something that we also want to work on, because there's certain types of designs for electronic devices that are just not sustainable in any way, shape, or form and not recyclable. So
To that point though, if the bill says anything that is powered by electricity.
Yep.
And there's something that's not recyclable
Right.
that way, like how do you?
Yeah, so-
How do you fix those two things?
yeah, so they would use the fee money to send it to hazardous waste disposal, because that's basically using the waste hierarchy triangle. Like that's the best option for those devices, unfortunately, because they're just bad devices. But if they don't do that, if they don't send those vapes to hazardous waste disposal, then they're going to be starting fires and polluting communities, right? So it is, even though it's really unfortunate, that's the best option for it. So that's what they'll use those funds for. Because otherwise, if you cut out every item that's not recyclable, you're actually incentivizing making devices that are not recyclable so that you don't have to pay the fee, right? So we didn't want to do that, but that was a big part of the conversation when we were writing this. So I'm gonna open this up to questions, although I know we've gotten a lot of our questions out already, but I want to just leave you with a quote from Dr. Rupali, if I can, except for this stuff is in the way, so I actually can't read it. But it says something like, since I can't read the first line, but I'm sympathetic to the argument or the Republican argument that our supply of metals comes from places that are known to have human rights abuses and all kinds of dirty politics. We should consider obtaining these metals from our backyard, but we can't do it by just greenlighting every mining project and trespassing over native treaties to get those metals. E-waste might really be a real solution. I don't know if you know Dr. Rupali Paike, but she's a widely loved local professor from Macalester College here. And if you want to sign up for action alerts, I'm sure Rise and Repair is maybe going to help out with action alerts too, but you can email me at that email. Yeah, Lori. Yeah, Lori is asking if it's going to be difficult to get coverage for all of Minnesota. And I assume you mean like collection coverage or, yeah. Yeah, so a lot of the folks supporting us in this are like the St. Louis County and Coochin County Environmental Services people. And part of the reason why they're so excited about it is because they are actually going to get their shipping fully funded. So if you're a registered collector, you can get, if you have a load of electronics to be sent to a registered recycler, they're going to pay the shipping from your address to their address with the fee money. So that's what makes it a big deal for rural areas, because they're not just dealing with like basically the same amount of dollars that the metro counties are dealing with. They actually will get more because their costs are higher because of shipping. And that's their number one barrier, is what they tell me, is that shipping is their number one barrier. So
What do you think in 2024 is the biggest challenge that this will face or that you're facing?
What's the biggest challenge in 2024? Do you mean the session or?
Sure.
I just think probably how fast this session is going to go. It's going to be a big challenge. Yeah. And also pushback from manufacturers and retailers. That's going to be, it's hard to know exactly how hard they're going to push back. We've gotten some agreement on certain parts of the bill with certain manufacturers, which is encouraging to know that they like at least elements of it, but there's elements of it they don't like. So, yeah.
You said the funding was from two sources. One was a fee assessed between the wholesaler and the retailer. And what was the other source?
It's called the source of funding is coming from two different places. Manufacturer responsibility and the retail fee. So manufacturer responsibility is basically every manufacturer that makes those devices, basically computers and TVs, they have to register in the state of Minnesota before they can sell on Amazon or eBay or at Best Buy, right? This is actually something that currently happens already, so we know it's feasible, and the MPCA will have no issue enforcing that.
Does the Chamber of Commerce weigh in on
Some Chamber of Commerce folks have, but they kind of take the stance of like, oh, we need to see what the final product is before we make a public stance. But yeah.
You said in the beginning that it was like $3 billion worth of materials here, so
Yeah.
once this thing is up and running, will that actually pay for the whole system itself? Once you get it going, so that it'll be self.
Yeah, so the question is, will the $3 billion worth of metals being recycled pay for the collection system eventually? So not like that, not the way that you're thinking. Actually, there's so much profit in selling electronics that it's that economy that's going to fund collection, right? So it's actually the people making money on making more and selling more and more electronics every year. It's actually going to come out of the pie there. So not on the back end, but on the front end. So the money that's being made selling electronics, that it's a piece of that pie that's going to pay for collection. If that makes
sense. Because that money that's made for selling electronics, that's
Yeah.
profit for some companies, they're gonna want the profit, so you're gonna have
Right.
to fee against them.
Yes, that's how it works.
So that
Yeah.
means we'll pay for it, this usually always ends up in the consumer's pocket, right?
Yes, if the retailers pass on that cost to the consumer, then yes.
So it'd be fair
Yeah.
to say the retailer collects the fee, but the consumer pays.
Perhaps, yeah, it depends on, sometimes when they enact fees like this, sometimes you see the whole cost going into the cost of the item and sometimes you don't. So it's hard to say one way or another how it will happen, but yeah. And it's somewhere, if just to give you an idea, it's somewhere around 2% of the cost. So yeah.
Has this been tried anywhere else? If it's working in other states, other countries?
Yeah, so the manufacturer responsibility side is pretty well known. But when you do that, you have to define specific items that you're covering. And so that's part of the reason why the other states are kind of falling short, is because they're just covering a small part of the waste stream. And so it is actually new, the idea of trying to cover the whole waste stream. So there's a piece of this that's very like tried and true for certain items. And then there's a new piece that says, okay, what's next? How can we get the rest of this waste stream? Because nobody in the country is collecting more than 24% in their state. So do we need
There's a
to?
question online on the language in the bill to keep the recycling centers out of environmental justice areas. Is there any wording in there about that?
Not in our bill. No, we don't have any legislation about recycling centers at this point, just the collection side to keep we're focusing on keeping electronics out of the waste stream for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you hopeful you'll have bipartisanship support on the bill?
Yes, yeah, we're pretty hopeful. We have 2 senators in the Senate that are supportive, that are Republicans, and one, Spencer Igo, if you're familiar, he's a very popular pro-mining legislator, and actually he's in the House, Representative Igo. Yeah, he's in the House. But he publicly said he would support it at a solar conference. So we're hoping he will stick to that.
Because we're talking about is there any national legislation at all that addresses this issue?
Not yet. We're talking to some, yeah. Oh, if there's, the question was if there's any national legislation that's addressing the same issue. There isn't. We're actually talking to a bunch of organizations that push legislation like this on a national level. And what they're doing is they're kind of waiting to see how does it go in Minnesota. And so in a lot of ways, we're going to be a guinea pig and we're going to say, how do we get to 100%? And here's how we think we can get to 100%. And they'll take our successes and hopefully we'll have a national policy someday. Yeah.
So, so far, the topic of mining iron range is very contentious,
Right.
Especially within, I would say within specifically the Democratic caucus. There are varying opinions and sometimes opposite arguments. We have members of the same party who are thinking very differently. There's different economics involved depending on what they represent. Are you seeing this coming closer to agreements in this area? So I know we've got some folks who are very adamantly against mining,
Yeah.
and then we have the folks who that's the hill they're going to die on. This
Right.
is to protect it, right?
Mhm.
And we want to try to make sure that this also provides jobs that might be lost because of how we're transitioning.
Right.
But are you seeing some progress in these agreements, or where is that at?
Yeah. So for the folks online, the question is about the debate, the pro versus anti-mining debate, and if we're seeing any progress there, and how that relates to this. Actually, that's how this work all started. So it was volunteers from Virginia, Minnesota, and they reached out to me to actually do that economic potential study to determine like, okay, how much of what the needs that we're fulfilling by mining, right? The jobs, the economic benefits, and the critical metals, how much of that could be replaced by mining our electronic waste. And so that's why this all started. And they're currently the ones supporting my work. So, yeah.
And I, just to kind of add to that, I could see as part of these negotiations, although it's not, environmental justice isn't something that's currently included. I could see that as something being within the party, something that people want to add or at least have a major discussion about. Because we've got some folks who are very adamant about pushing environmental justice components too. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's many different reasons people are supporting this. Some people are just supporting it because of money and jobs. Some are supporting it because of the potential for critical metals that we need for the energy transition, right? For things like EVs and solar panels. Some people are supporting it because they want to see a day when Minnesota has moved on from using mining as our only source of great jobs up in the Iron Range, right? And some folks are supporting it because they want to see all these toxins out of our waste streams and that are disproportionately burdening our most vulnerable communities. So there's lots of different reasons that people are coming to the table, but it has been really fascinating to see. Like I have quite a few pro-mining folks that are from the Iron Range that support this work, and they're really excited to see it happen. So it's bridging some of those divides, which has been really wholesome to see. So, yeah. Yeah.
Is there going to be a limit on how much a household can recycle for their specific time? Because I noticed this was just for residential.
Right. Yeah. So collectors under the, oh, right. So the question was, is there going to be a limit to how much residents could recycle at any given time, right, at the recycling facility or the collection facilities? There isn't one written into the bill. So if a collector can feasibly take everything that you brought, so say you have like a whole truckload, if they can take it, they'll take it. But if they physically don't have the space, they're allowed to say, come back next week or come back after we've shipped out the material. So do you have truckloads?
Life cycles. Like there are people that will buy a new cell phone every year. But cell phones last a lot longer than 1 year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, so it's like what is the encouragement for people to use things a little bit longer?
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
Than buy a new stove every year, every 3 years, or a cell phone every year. So you know, if you can recycle it, there's no. It's just more waste.
Yeah. So what's the incentive for folks to use their electronics longer? There in this bill, we're not addressing design issues, but that's what one big passion of mine. I used to I helped pass Right to Repair that passed last year. And all that said was that manufacturers of electronic devices have to provide manuals and parts to fix your electronics. What it didn't say was that you can't glue your batteries to the screen. You can't use plastic screws. You can't like basically you can't design your device to break in 1 year. But it should, right? It should, right? That's something that we should have. We should have consumer protection around the devices that you buy. Like if you buy a computer, you should feasibly be able to use it for 10 years, right? Or more, right? We used to make devices that way. I used to work at an electronics recycling center, and we would see things come in that were literally from the 40s and had just stopped working right next to a PS4 and an iPhone 11, right? So it's like, at some point we forgot how to make our devices last a long time, but.
Because I know like Excel, like for example, will recycle like a refrigerator, but you only get like one within a specific time period.
Yeah.
You know, and then
right.
Give you a credit.
Right. Otherwise, it's on the consumer to recycle those items. For example, that's how it works today. So If you're gonna recycle your microwave, you might have to pay $35. But that's because the whole cost of the recycling program is on you, the one person who wants to recycle your item. Whereas what we're doing with this is we're spreading it across everybody that's buying electronics, right? And the consumer, and the producers, right? So everybody benefiting from electronics are paying for their recycling. So when you bring your microwave to be recycled, it's free, and you're not paying the whole cost of the whole program. Yeah.
What can individuals like this do? What do you want assistance to do?
Yeah, so if you want to sign up for action alerts, one of the things I'm going to be asking folks to do is to come and testify and to write letters to your legislators. So there'll be a letter of support that will hopefully come out really soon with the bill numbers. And that is for organizations. So if you're some organization, either your business or your church or your school or any organization that you interact with wants to sign on to that bill, that's really great, because then the legislators see like, oh, hey, there's a whole bunch of different people that care about this. For example, I think it's Lutherans Activism. I forget the name of the organization, but like it's a Lutheran organization. They're going to sign on to the bill because they care about it. And that's really says a lot to legislators, because it's not just people that are going to make a profit off of this that want to see it happen. Yeah, so those are some ways.
So there's one more
Yeah.
question online about manufacturers from foreign countries. How would we
Yeah.
assess the fee? Or even retailers. I mean, we could have things shipped from overseas here.
Right, yeah, that's a good question for somebody in like house research. But I don't know exactly how the specifics of how they do it, but the folks at the MPCA basically have this like cease sales list. So they go through Amazon and eBay and all the main places where people are buying electronics. And if they see a brand that hasn't registered, then they send Amazon a cease sales list. And I've actually heard that Amazon and eBay are now doing this on their own. Which is super encouraging. So even sometimes that they get to it before the MPCA gets to it, and they send that brand an alert saying, we're going to remove you from our site if you don't register and pay the fee. So it's actually something that they're really able to do pretty easily. I mean, easily, there's staff time allowed to it for sure. Yeah, it takes time. Yeah, so I think, agreed.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions that Kate, we had.
Question? A
right.
question I have?
Somebody else wants to talk.
Owen,
Oh,
rise and recover.
rise and recover.
Rise and repair. Yeah.
Rise and repair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a
Only
Owen from.
after a huge round of applause.
Thank you. Now, if you want to come right here, so people can hear you online,
Yeah.
and tell us what your organization is and what. Oh, and we're gonna unshare the screen. Stop sharing. And,
You just lined me up.
okay,
Beam
you're,
me up, Scotty.
you're there.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
I'll just take a couple minutes, I think like 4 or 5 or whatever, however it takes, and happy to answer questions. My name is Owen Small. I use he, him pronouns. I'm not officially here representing an organization, but an alliance that's called Rise and Repair. It was built off of a one-day lobby and rally day that happened last year at the Capitol. And it's evolved more into like a broad alliance this year that is endeavoring to kind of create a shared ecosystem of cooperation between all of the amazing groups that are advancing climate justice legislation and legislation that's formed around Indigenous rights. And so Maria with RECA is one of the like amazing organizations that like has kind of come underneath this banner of us trying to create this like cooperative ecosystem to advance some of these issues. And so I guess I'll share a couple things since I'm here, and what this alliance is around is climate justice and Indigenous rights. And one of the last slides on the presentation we just saw, right, was talking about like kind of trampling over native treaties in the pursuit of some of these minerals, right? And one of the things that's like super interesting, that's like a real live example of this, I think that's very relevant to this topic, is the Talon Metals mine. Has anybody heard of that mine being proposed up in Aitkin County? Yeah, right. And one of the things, if you look at, like, for instance, the Mille Lacs Band's PR campaign in opposition to that mine is a bombshell statistic, right? That 97% of the nickel deposits in the United States reside within 35 miles of a Native American reservation. And so when we're thinking through things like this just transition, like, how are we going to go about getting the materials and everything, right? And so, like, something like this e-waste bill is actually, like, you know, broadly being encouraged by Mille Lacs Band. Like, before we come into our backyard to go after nickel, like, can we recover it from the waste stream? And so, big picture, this alliance is organizing, and I guess we could, if you're on a cell phone, I don't have anything to give you tonight, but it's riseandrepair.org. Basically, the concept is that we're tracking 5 categories of legislation, of areas of policy work. And one of them is environmental justice, which I know you were bringing up, right? Climate goals and truth telling, like what are and are not false solutions. Reparations and sovereignty is one of the first buckets of that 5-bucket platform. I'm trying not to look at my phone to remember the others. Economic development and just transition, right? So, like, all the things that, like, we're talking about IRA funding as this stuff rolls out, making sure that it's done in an equitable way. I think that was 5. I don't know if that was 5, but they're on the website under the platform. So if you go to riseandrepair.org, you can see that. There's no specific legislation listed right now. It's just the kind of categories. And as we're kind of able to connect with groups, we're trying to fold in all of this very progressive kind of legislation that is covered under that scope. And I guess what I'll say, and, you know, maybe because, right, like, one thing's beautiful. I mean, how many people are on Zoom here? I don't know, 30, 25, 30, right? And then we're in a room of about 25, 30 people. And this is like an example, right, of like a self-contained kind of group that has, like, mobilizing its own base of people. And there's a couple things going on within Rise and Repair. One, on, like, Wednesdays right now is a space where a lot of the folks that are doing full-time legislative affairs work and lobbying at the Capitol are meeting to talk about strategy, like how to cooperate and apply pressure on the Minnesota legislature during the session. And then on Friday, there's a spin-out session that I know Lori has been, you know, active in, that is mainly focused around, like, the grassroots mobilization to apply that pressure using our own voices from afar, right? So, you know, when there's an opportunity maybe coming up to, like, advance this bill, the dream of this alliance is that somebody like Maria is able to see what we need to do, bring that into the rapid response kind of space that's happening on Friday, and then potentially a group like this or the groups that we're all affiliated with might be able to do that kind of thing where you're going to write a letter to your elected official, you know, either from, like, an organization like this, or maybe it's a faith community or some place where you are self-organized, right? And deploy one of these, like, you know, tactics that can help apply pressure to pass some of this legislation. That's the quick maybe plug, I'll say, for Rise and Repair. Happy to answer questions. Also happy to stick around for a second and connect with anybody that wants to talk more about it.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
Any questions for Owen?
Keep up the amazing work.
Well, one quick question. So
Yes.
did you mention the cumulative impacts?
So that was on the platform last year, and yes, and we'll you know, the continuation of all that should be on there this year. Yeah.
And the question was regarding cumulative impact.
Yeah.
That was something that was, speaking of contentious things, that was something that got stripped out. And we're still trying to push it. So I just want to make sure that folks on the outside too are still trying.
And, like, the Zero Waste Coalition, you're probably familiar with, right? And, like, I mean, I think all of the legislation, hopefully, that coalition is pushing will end up on this platform. And also, if you're tracking anything, we'd love to connect with you about if there's other stuff that should land on there. Yeah.
And Tess Dornfeld shared your link to Rise and Repair in the chat, so people got to see that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet.
Any other questions for Owen? All right, give him a hand.
Cool.
Thank you. And thanks, everybody. I did forget to mention that we had co-hosts today, Resilient Roseville, St. Croix Valley Indivisible, and Vote Climate, other groups that are around the Twin Cities that support what we're doing, and groups like Maria's and Owen's that can always use more people. And again, if you're interested in Northeast Metro Climate Action, getting more involved with us, we're always looking for more people. We have members in White Bear, North Oaks, Shoreview, Vadnais Heights. And so we're trying to expand if other Northeast Metro communities. So if you like what you saw tonight, and I know many of you have been to many of our events before, we're trying to keep this going. And it is great to see so many people interested in this tonight. Our next event will be in March. Did we get a confirmation on the date yet?
No date, end of March.
End of March.
Solar panels.
Yeah.
Solar energy.
Solar energy. So we'll be reconvening our event in end of March on solar panels. All right. Any other questions before we go? Yes.
Where do you guys meet?
This is it. We meet. Yeah. Yeah. So you can, if you're interested, northeastmetroclimateaction.org. It's a long URL, but it's our name. And we just meet on Zoom once a month for our planning meetings, then going over, we have a lot of things to discuss on all action items that involve working with our elected leaders and working with communities on different things. And then we also have time to plan for our next event. So that's basically what we do. And we like to have members from each of the communities who can work directly with their city governments and their local elected leaders. And that's kind of been where we've really made strides in working with elected leaders, and we're not a 501c3, so we can do advocacy. We're just a volunteer group, so it is we're not limited on what we can do politically. So that's gives us a little freedom to work directly with and promote and advocate for very specific political things as well. So that's what we do. Once a month we have a Zoom planning meeting, and then usually once a month we'll have an event like this. Great question, though. Very good question. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. And thanks to everybody online for putting up with our technical. Yeah.
Hi, Steve. I'm TJ.
Oh, hi, TJ. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for inviting me tonight.
Yeah.
It's great program.
Yeah, we had a really nice turnout. Oh, go away. There you go. End this thing. And